everybody. Welcome back to the Routine Podcast.
Gymnastics Conversations.
I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Chelsea's mom, Diana.
And we're back for episode 41.
Hi, Chels.
Hi, Mom.
We're still not together yet, but we're trying to get there.
We are. But we both were able to watch the meets this weekend.
Yes. And one of the reasons we're not together is because where I'm at had 20 inches of snow.
Yeah. And then it came my direction a couple days later. So now I have like 8 inches of snow. So
wasn't in our plans.
It wasn't.
I'm sad about that because we were supposed to go to our first meet of the year together this weekend.
But I went alone. I held the crew together. Me, myself, and I.
Routine podcasts continued. Rain, snow, sleet. We did it.
It was a good meet. I went to the, not to jump ahead, but I went to the George Washington University quad meet with Cornell, UNC, and Ball State. And I was pleasantly surprised. And that was actually my first time going to a meet at George Washington. So that was just a cool experience.
What made it cool?
I had always seen videos at the Smith Center, which is what the arena is called. So being in it was definitely a lot different than what I had pictured. It was a lot more intimate. It reminded me a little bit of the Towson Arena.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing that I love about Towson is that it feels like a big arena from the graphics and the video monitor. But to your point, but when you're watching the sport, you feel like you're closer to the gymnast.
Right. Like the floor is right there.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, good. Well, maybe hopefully next time I'll be home and we can do it together.
Yes. It's not fun. I mean, it's fun, but I have little comments and I can't talk to the dude next to me yo, did you just see that? I just have to kind of keep it to myself. But yeah, I think we should start with kind of recapping the meets. We got a lot of tweets as meets were happening this weekend, which was a lot of fun. The first meet that I watched was the Florida versus Missouri meet, and wow, that was a great meet.
Well, and I'll just say the first meet I got the chance to watch was Auburn versus LSU, and wow, that was an interesting meet. I'm not trying to jump you, but wow.
Mom, we'll get there. We'll express our feelings a little bit later. But the Florida-Missouri meet, that was a good meet for me because usually Missouri, as of now, they are one of the lower-ranked SEC teams. But with that being said, the SEC is still a very competitive conference, so they're still a very good team. But this year, they really, really brought it. The head coach, Shannon Welker, it's his 6th season. So he's really in the groove of his head coaching career. And it really shows. They really seem like things are coming together. Because whenever you bring in a whole administration, it takes a while for everyone to kind of get the swing of things.
Sure.
But it seems like he's really implementing what he wants done. And the athletes are all on board. And with the new athletes that he's bringing in, they're a lot more competitive. So it's been really cool to see this whole transition since his hiring of this new Missouri team that's competitive in the SEC. Congrats to Shannon Welker and the whole staff at the University of Missouri.
Absolutely.
You're doing great things.
When they were competing against Florida, it was they didn't really care that they were competing against Florida. They were just doing them.
Right, exactly. And they were actually competing against Florida.
Right.
Yes, Florida was really good, but Florida's just really good. But it wasn't a complete blowout, which was fun to see. And I actually tweeted at the end of the meet that was an enjoyable meet to watch on both ends.
Totally agree. And I think really it was the first and second rotations. They were pretty close in terms of scores.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what Jason Fredericks of Road to Nationals told us. He talked to us last season about this, and he's always said he wants more competitive gymnastics beyond just the big teams. And I think what we're already seeing this season, and again, it's only been a couple of weekends of meets, but what we've seen is more competitive schools other than just the big schools that we always talk about. And I think that can only be good for the sport.
Totally. It just seems like gymnastics is more important to sports administrations at these universities, not just in terms of coaching or the athletes that they bring in, but in terms of the facilities that are being built, the resources that are there for them. And something that I've noticed, especially this year across the board, is the increase in the graphics that they have. The promotion that goes behind the teams has just been knocked up a notch.
The reasons that schools care is because the media is paying more attention. So that means the funding is changing for schools. And then you've got schools like Nebraska building a multi-million-dollar training facility for their athletes. So it's just what Jason said. I think it bodes well for the sport, and I hope it continues.
So moving on to Florida, that team, I think they met the expectations that everyone had on them.
They did, but they weren't even at their best
I
yet.
know. Yeah, that's so true. But they were in an interesting position because they actually started a week later than everybody else. So people were anticipating watching them even more. Especially since they have the number 1 ranked freshman class. But the only event that was like, I don't know what's going to happen was vaults.
Yeah.
I think the nerves, like, they just looked so nervous.
When it was a freshman, right? I'm just so glad we interviewed Savannah and Trinity.
I know, like, it felt like I knew them when I was watching them. Like, I was like, come on, Savannah.
Yeah. Because of the fact we had interviewed them, there was a very human touch. Mm-hmm. You know, it was like I was their mother watching them compete for the first time in this big arena with all these people screaming. But they did great. Both of them did great. All the freshmen did great.
The whole team did great. And as they said in the commentary, Alyssa Bauman got injured the day before the meet. So they had to fill her spot in a couple of events. And honestly, you wouldn't even know that one of their top key players was out that meet because the B team is just as good as the A team.
Well, and to be honest with you, I didn't know she was missing until they got to floor. Rachel Gowie was the last athlete to do floor. And Kathy said, and Alyssa Bauman got hurt yesterday. And so Rachel is anchoring floor. And I thought, they have another athlete that's better than the ones who've just competed.
The event that was just like, oh my gosh, for me was floor.
Yeah.
The back end of the lineup, they almost rival UCLA's floor lineup to me. And that's like saying a lot.
Oh, I think so, Chelsea.
Naya Reed, oh my gosh, her floor routine was so good. She was so confident. She had the sass.
Again, we can talk about the freshmen, and they're amazing. But Alicia's floor routine.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And again, I loved last year's floor routine. And we talked about this on our previous episode. I didn't think they could do a better floor routine. But they did.
And this goes back to what I said about Missouri in seeing like this transition of where they were and how they are now. Alicia Boren is the epitome of that. Can you see her doing the routine that she did this weekend, her freshman year?
No. Can I just tell you this? And I know this isn't about me, but that routine is the only routine I think besides yours that I actually physically wanted to get up and start dancing with her. And she does the little hip and the hand thing. And so I started doing that too.
She has so much fun. And then Trinity Thomas, she rounded out.
She rounded out, Chelsea, but I still say Rachel. And the gorgeousness.
Yeah, she is beautiful.
And the poise and the precision and the grace. I mean, and again, I loved both routines.
They have a really, really good lineup. It reminds me kind of the LSU's floor lineup a couple of years ago where they had like the really pretty dancers, but also the really powerful gymnasts, and then some of them that had a mixture of both.
Yeah. And can I just say Ashley Natt's junior floor routine?
We talked about this last episode.
When she flies through the air.
I think it was her 2016 floor routine. That's one of my favorite college floor routines.
Yeah, it really was. Although I gotta tell you, Alicia's for me, it's right up there.
So that was a great meet to start off Friday Night Heights. And then right after that meet was Auburn versus LSU at Auburn.
Yeah.
Let's just take a deep breath, collect our emotions.
Yeah. That's all I can say, Chelsea, is yeah. I'm so sorry. I want to be a big girl. I really do. But this is hard for me.
But I feel like you're like kind of the underdog. You appreciate a good underdog story.
I definitely do. Unless it comes to Sarah Finnegan. Then it's like all bets are off. I'm like 100% there.
But you have to admit that was a really good meet.
Oh, Auburn was amazing. I was very, very happy for Auburn. And again, we talked about the freshman at Florida, the freshman at Auburn.
Darian Goburn.
Whew.
Oh.
So she started out on vault with a 9.9.
I usually don't like argue about scoring because like it is what it is, whatever. But that was higher than a 9.9.
It was, but it was the first or second meet of this season, and the judges aren't throwing out 10s yet.
They did for Maggie.
Well, you should for Maggie. Maggie always gets a 10. And then she got like another 9.9, and then she got another 9. I mean, she was just like, no, it was crazy.
At Sammy is a dancer said, I hope you guys will mention Darian on the podcast. Maybe a segment about athletes not everyone is talking about. So here is our segment on Darian.
I think we'll be talking about Darian throughout the year. We should be talking about Darian throughout the year.
You can't not talk about her.
No, you can't not talk about her, but also schools like LSU need to worry.
Yeah, I think they are worried right about now. They are a little bit worried.
Dee Dee's not worried. Dee Dee's got this.
One thing I do want to mention about Darian, especially at Auburn, when I was watching their meet last weekend, they did a lot of crowd shots. And in the crowd, there was a lot of young gymnasts. And I think these young gymnasts that look up to these girls, I feel like what she's doing at Auburn is so important for future gymnasts. Because at the end of the day, representation matters. And when these young girls see college gymnasts that look like them killing it every weekend, being so confident on the floor, they believe in themselves.
Sure, I agree.
So good job, Auburn. Good job, Darian. And I wish I just had an ounce of your confidence.
The other thing I think that's important about Darian, and again, other athletes like Darian, is that she didn't come from the elite scene. Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. And so when we see athletes that didn't do elite and have the success that she had, that's good for the sport of gymnastics. Mm-hmm. So that was Darian. I think we got to talk about the whole meet itself, though, right? Spoiler alert, LSU lost to Auburn. Not by a necessarily close margin either.
Yeah. And I forget who I was tweeting with, but I was torn because if Auburn wins, that's like amazing for them to kind of beat this running record of LSU always beating Auburn.
Yeah, and we're talking a years and years and years record.
Right, exactly. But if LSU loses, then they're out of the SEC regular season championship.
I didn't know that's what that meant.
Well, maybe not. It depends on how the other teams do throughout the season. But for the past 2 years, I think they've been undefeated. So that's what made them the SEC regular season champs.
See, I'm glad I didn't know that at the time. I would have been even more depressed.
Yeah, so there was kind of a lot riding on the line. But at the end of the day, Auburn just had a better meet.
And it's what we talked about, you had young, new athletes, freshmen and sophomores that aren't competing in their home gym. And LSU started off very, very close or behind, which means there's a lot of pressure that's now on these girls. And you could just see it happening. You could just see it.
It just kind of unraveled at the end of the day. This is a learning experience for them.
Right.
Since they're so young, they probably will never forget this meet.
No. I don't think they will. Oh, and then, we can't forget, then McKenna got injured, and that kind of flipped the switch for everybody, too.
Yeah, that's when it really started.
Yeah, I just think it wasn't a good night.
But I'm sure they'll be back and better than ever on Friday night.
I hope so. I'm still a fan.
I am, too. I'm a fan. I never will not be a LSU fan. Moving on, the UCLA quad meet against Michigan State, Cal, and UC Davis, which unfortunately was not streamed, which is like so sad because it seemed like that was an incredible meet. From all of the videos I've seen, it's in this huge arena. The crowd is huge. Everyone is loud. Everyone's just loving gymnastics. So I'm really upset that wasn't streamed, but a lot of the videos have been put online. Kyla, spoiler alert, she got a 10 on bars, and Kate got a 10 on floor. And now her floor routine is viral on the internet. And speaking of UCLA and Kate's viral floor routine, we got a voicemail. I actually deemed him as the current crown wearer of the voicemails. Instead of the stick crown, we have the voicemail crown.
I agree. Erky's back.
Hey, Chelsea and Diana, this is Erky. I watched Caitlin Ohashi's floor exercise probably about 100 times on YouTube, and I kind of noticed Senator Kamala Harris commented, Jamel Hill from ESPN commented. And I think the word I see a lot associated with this routine is magic. And I'm a big Lakers fan, and I think Magic Johnson, that's probably the most fitting nickname maybe in all of sports. And I kind of think Caitlin lives up to it. I mean, this routine was pretty magical and it's captivating. And I think it's really putting gymnastics in the mainstream sports, at least for now. So congrats to Caitlin and UCLA for a great meet. Go Bruins.
Go Bruins. He's right, though. He's absolutely right.
Yeah, it's so great to see, like he said, kind of mainstream media outlets enjoying what we enjoy every weekend. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's fun for us too, because I feel as if we were part of the routine that she does through our Miss Val interview, where she included us in on talking about those steps that they were doing
over FaceTime with the French bread and the onion. So congrats to UCLA, and hopefully we'll be able to watch the meet online next weekend. And then the last meet I want to briefly go over is the George Washington meet, as I mentioned earlier. It was UNC, Ball State, and Cornell at GW. And one thing that really stood out to me was Ball State. Ball State was in the lead going into the last rotation.
Really?
Yeah. And they were, like, really good. The landings were there on vaults. A lot of their landings were stuck, if not like a little hop back. On bars, their dismounts were there. And they were another team, like you said earlier about Missouri, about being in the zone and just doing their thing. That's how Ball State was this meet. They were not paying attention to any of the outside competitors. They were just in their little zone, and they just hit their routines. It was really cool to see, because that's another team that we don't really watch.
Oh, you didn't say who won.
Oh, UNC ended up winning.
Okay.
Because Ball State ended on beam, and it wasn't a great rotation.
So the first three were good, and then it kind of didn't go so well.
And then beam does what beam does best, and they just throw a wrench in your plan.
Yeah.
Once they get beam together, they'll be good.
Sure.
They'll be good.
And how did GW do?
GW did pretty good. They had a couple of falls here and there. They just look like a team that it's the beginning of season.
Right.
Like, as season goes on, they'll iron out the little details and everything will be good.
Okay.
They were also entertaining, so hopefully I'll be able to go to more GW meets in the future.
Oh, guys, did you hear she said I'll this time? Usually it's will. She's already dissed me. Did you hear that? I heard
Hopefully we will be able to go to more GW meets in the future.
Missed one meet, and now I'm no longer part of the Routine podcast. So it was a really fun weekend of meets, very surprising results, and I truly believe this is the beginning of what this season's going to look like.
Even though it's only the second weekend, but this season is so much more competitive. I feel like, yes, we have those teams that are like really good, but once you get past like the top three, it's all kind of mumble jumble at that point. Like, all of the teams are pretty even across the board. All of the freshmen that are now competing are so good.
And what makes that exciting is we get to watch them for the next 4 years. So before we end this show, we do have one segment that we wanted to make sure we included.
As the Gymternet knows, Fantasy Gymnastics, I think, is one of the reasons why women's college gymnastics is continuing to grow year after year.
I agree. Based on our interview, I truly believe that Fantasy Gymnastics has really helped the sport.
So we talked to the creator of Fantasy Gymnastics, Kristen Watkins, and she kind of took us back to the beginning of why she started the game.
So we are joined by Kristen of Fantasy Gymnastics. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
We're doing pretty good.
We're doing well. We were just chatting about fantasy gymnastics, and I'm going to be the first to admit it. I don't understand it at all. So this is like a great interview for us so that you could help us understand. But I think before we get into that, can we find out a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kristen. I started fantasy gymnastics probably about 6 years ago at this point. It's been a while. I competed in college gymnastics for a few years, and so really enjoyed doing that. And then it was kind of a nice way for me to stay involved in the college gymnastics world after I graduated. I work full-time still at a different job. So this is just kind of a fun side project that I run as well.
Yeah. And so what school did you graduate from?
I went to MIT in Boston.
Were you on the gymnastics team when they had a team at MIT?
I was. I fortunately got to do it for 2 years on the varsity team, and then I was also there when they cut the team. So I did club gymnastics for a few years after that as well.
Oh, that's disappointing, isn't it?
It was tough. I mean, I think the whole team wasn't really expecting it, at least from what I remember. And I think a lot of us also, picked going to MIT for a lot of reasons, one of which was being able to do gymnastics. But we were really fortunate. They let us keep the facility and had the space to at least have a club team and keep working out there. So we didn't lose everything. It was definitely disappointing, but it was still fun.
At what point are you deciding, hey, I think we could do something with fantasy gymnastics?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story, actually. So around 2012, I graduated and left MIT. And as I was sort of just trying to figure out what I wanted to do and sort of how to stay involved in gymnastics now that I wasn't actively competing anymore, it popped up on Twitter. That was around the time when the Gymternet was sort of starting to exist. The Olympics were happening. A lot of more people were online talking about gymnastics, and I started following some of the early days of the Gymternet. And some folks were actually just trying to organize their own fantasy gymnastics league. And so before that, I'd never really thought about it before, but they were talking about actually running the league through a bunch of different spreadsheets and trying to do the drafting by hand. And I didn't study computer science, but I took a few programming classes and I was like, hey, I think I know enough to maybe help you with that. So at least someone's not spending hours and hours of their time going through spreadsheets trying to pick out the next ranked person. So I was like, hey, I could probably help with that. And so I did that. And then it sort of just snowballed into being like, well, if I could do that, I could probably, maybe make a website so people could play on it together. And like, maybe I could add these other things. And so it actually kind of got started by an idea that was already online. And I just thought it'd be a fun thing to do. And it was something that I thought I knew enough about that I might be able to help make it a little easier for everyone to enjoy.
What kinds of things did you think, hey, this is what I could do to make it easier for people?
So I think the big thing that I originally thought about was just actually automating the drafting process rather than someone manually having to look through someone's list, figure out which gymnasts are taken, and then figure out what their next top one is to give them to their team and then do that for the next person. I wrote an algorithm that sort of does that pretty quickly. It takes maybe a minute to run. Like I can only imagine how many hours that would have taken someone to do by hand. So I think that was the first one that just seemed sort of like an easy thing that I could do to help. And then one of the other pieces that came a little bit later was actually automating the score imports and actually scoring teams every week, because Road to Nationals exists now and we actually use them to get our data. But before they existed, there wasn't really a great website that aggregated all the scores. And so actually scoring people's teams and lineups every week was a lot of work as well. There was a pretty easy way for us to kind of pull all the data in and calculate scores for people so that there wasn't someone having to sort of do that in the background as well.
So now that we understand at least kind of your background, how would we go about putting a team together? And then what do we do throughout the season?
People approach making their teams in different ways. Every year you make a list of people you want on your team, which is your draft list, and you can put up to 200 gymnasts on that list, and you sort of rank them in order of how much you want them on their team. There's different strategies. Some people really, really like one or two particular gymnasts, or maybe they're really big, UCLA fans or Georgia fans or other particular schools, and so they'll rank those schools or those gymnasts really high on their list. There's some people who get really, really into the strategy. I think a friend of mine actually even mentioned that she's like writing a program to tell her how to rank people on her list and maximize her chances. So there's a big spectrum of how people actually decide to rank people, but it's pretty much based on whatever you want and who you want most on your team. The draft closes, and then I run the algorithm I mentioned earlier that sort of gives everyone their teams based on their ranked order of who they want. And once you have your team, every week you get to submit a lineup. So in the same way that if I was a college coach, I would have to decide who I wanted to compete for me every week when I was deciding who I wanted to compete on bars or who to compete on beam. You basically get to pretend like you're a college coach and decide who's on your sort of virtual lineup every week based on, if you think they'll compete that event, how they might score, things like that. And then at the end of the week, you see how you did, see who competed, how they did. Maybe they fell. Maybe they did a really good routine. It's super exciting when one of your gymnasts gets a 10-0 because, obviously that's perfect. And so every week you'll get a score based on who you put up to compete for you this week. And then you can see how you're ranked against everyone else you're competing with in your conference.
And what prohibits me from, if I pick, the top 10 gymnasts in the country? So if you've listened to the show, I'm a Sarah Finnegan fan. So if I had Sarah Finnegan from LSU, and then I put Maggie Nichols from Oklahoma, and I put Caitlin from UCLA. But anyhow, I picked these top gymnasts. Mm-hmm. But I would think everybody in the country would do that.
Yeah. So basically the way it works is everyone gets assigned to a conference. So sort of, again, in the same way that college gymnastics works, you could be assigned to the SEC conference. And you'll be in a group with probably about 20 other people that are playing fantasy gymnastics. And within those 20, no one can have the same gymnast. So it sort of forces you to diversify and sort of have a lot of different gymnasts on your team. Everyone might rank Sarah Finnegan first, but only one person is going to get her. And same with everyone else. So it kind of helps even it out and requires a little bit more strategy to make sure you have people who can cover all the different events and who might be stronger on certain things or weaker on others, just so that you have coverage of everything you need.
And that's where your algorithm comes into play, is making those decisions of who gets which gymnast.
Yeah, it does. It runs pretty similar to other fantasy sports in the sense that it'll randomly decide who gets to pick first. And then from your list, it'll pick which one you want on your list. If the top ranked person you have is on your list is still available, you get that person. If not, it sort of keeps going down. So it works similar to the way other fantasy sports works in that sense, and that it just basically picks the best pick of the group that's left based on how you ranked everyone in the draft.
Do you play yourself?
I usually do. Yeah. Admittedly, I think some people spend a really long time drafting their teams and really think about the order and who's the top all-arounder who no one else is going to pick so I can get them first. And I usually don't have time to do that because I'm usually running the site. So I usually end up with kind of a random team, which is fun. Mm-hmm. I don't usually do very well, but I do play.
But you have fun.
I do, yeah. And it's always fun. I think one of my favorite things, and sort of one of the ways I designed fantasy gymnastics actually, was to make it so that people needed to get familiar with some other teams or gymnasts that they might not know otherwise. Because of the way the draft works, you can't just have a team of all people that you already knew before. You have to kind of dig in and find, who are the star all-arounders who are on the Division III teams, or who are the, really star balance beam people on sort of Division I teams that maybe you've never followed before. So it makes it so that you have to find some of these cool people who you may not have heard of before, and then you get to kind of follow them for the season, which is really fun.
Sure. And do you find that you're watching gymnastics in a different way based on your teams?
I do. And I from what I've seen of people on Twitter, I think they do too. Now I feel like there's so many live streams that are available. A lot of them are actually free even, that sometimes I'll just tune into a meet or something like that. If I have someone on my team who I might not have tuned into the meet otherwise, I'm like, hey, I kind of want to see what her routines look like. I keep seeing every week she gets 9/8. I wonder what that looks like. So I think, try and find out a little bit more about people and watch some meets that I maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
We're asking our listeners which team is going to win. Do you?
Oh boy.
Do you want to try to tell us what you think's going to happen?
Oh man, I can give it a guess.
Okay.
My sense is that UCLA is probably still going to be a pretty strong team. I feel like they've got such a strong group coming back, and they have some great freshmen that I wouldn't be surprised to see them towards the top. Obviously, Oklahoma is sort of always on the list, although I'm interested to see what they do they lost some seniors and they have some new freshmen that I'm not sure sort of where they're at. So I would keep them in the mix. And then I feel like for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been really rooting for LSU and for Aditi Bro to finally get her win.
I know.
And so I really do want them to do well this year and would love to see them win as well. And I'm always rooting for a new team to win. I think when Fantasy Gym started was right around when Florida was one of the the fifth team ever to win or something. And it's been so cool to see a bunch of other teams come up and win who had never before. So if nothing else, I'd love to see an underdog who hasn't won before win, which LSU would sort of fit that bill.
Sure,
Definitely.
Sure. Okay, so you did a really good job of not telling us exactly who you wanted.
Sorry.
I wrote down UCLA 1, Oklahoma 2, LSU 3, but I don't think that's what you wanted.
That would probably be my guess, but I would love to see LSU win.
Okay. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be with you just based on what you said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we'd love for Dee Dee to get a win.
Yeah. So I used to live in the Bay Area. I don't anymore. But while I was there, I became a huge Cal fan. So I'm not sure that they totally have what it needs to win this year, just given how stacked some of the other teams are. But I'm always excited when they make nationals and things like that. So I'm also definitely rooting for them too.
Yeah. This has been so much fun, Kristen.
Yes.
Yeah. It's been so good to talk to you guys.
I feel like with the college gymnastics scene, year after year, it just continues to grow. And I think a large part of it has to do with fantasy gymnastics. Like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of just expanding everybody's mind and looking to different regions and divisions just to learn more about different gymnasts. So I just want to thank you for helping to continue to help the sport grow.
Thank you so much. That was actually a big part of why I started it, actually. I mentioned at the beginning that MIT cut their team while I was there. And I always sort of felt like nobody ever cuts their football team because everyone's always paying attention and watching it. And I always sort of felt like if I could do a little bit to help more people pay attention to gymnastics and help keep it on the list of sports that stay at schools, it would be great. So thank you so much. That's exciting to hear that you think that.
I agree. You know, thank you for your contribution. Kristen, it's been so nice talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes, thank you both.
Okay, all the best to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So it was a really fun interview. I didn't know anything at all about fantasy gymnastics until we talked to Kristen. And I didn't play this year, but next year I'm on it.
What was really interesting about the interview is I didn't realize how young she was. And for her to create such a service that kind of expands the women's college gymnastics community is really inspiring. And she does it all for free.
And the reason that she did it, because her school canceled the sport, she wanted to do her part to continue the sport. And her part is huge.
I know.
So, yeah, you know, congratulations to Kristen for such a, you know, success. And just thank you.
Yeah.
Right? Because to your point, she's helped the sport to continue to be successful at schools across the country.
Yes. So she actually has a PayPal. So I'll leave the PayPal link on our website if you all would like to give to Fantasy Gymnastics to help them continue to run the site as well as they do.
So we got meets coming up again.
We do. It's another full weekend of gymnastics. And what's interesting about this third week of women's college gymnastics is that now starts the in-conference matchups. So this weekend, one meet that I'm really looking forward to is Alabama at Georgia. And that's interesting to me because as of right now, Alabama is ranked 17th in the country.
Oh my. I don't think I knew that.
And Georgia is ranked 10th. And the meet is at Georgia. And a lot of people I've seen are kind of blaming the low scores because the judges at Alabama, their past two meets have been at home. So this is kind of the real test to see if it's really the judges at Alabama or if it's other things.
Other factors.
Yeah. So that should be a good meet to watch. And I think with this new Georgia team, Alabama and Georgia is kind of equal at this point. And then also another interesting meet that should be this weekend, Florida will be at LSU. And as we said, I'm sure Dee Dee had a real good conversation with the team, and I'm sure they're ready to fight as hard as ever. So good luck, LSU. Good luck, Florida. I'm sure this is going to be like one of the top meets of the season.
I'm, of course, looking forward to Auburn and watching Darian again. Auburn is competing at Missouri, so obviously I'm looking forward to seeing Missouri. And then Utah. I'm looking forward to the Utah meet. Got to watch my girl, Michaela.
Yeah, Utah's been doing really good this season. They're actually ranked 4th this week, so
that's great.
Good job, Utah.
Bring it, Utah. And Utah is going to be competing at Oregon State.
Yes. But it was another great week of women's college gymnastics. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to rate us on the Apple Podcast app. Give us 5 stars. Also comment if you have something that you want to share with us, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Our Twitter is @RoutinePodcast. You can also email us, which is info@theroutinepodcast.com, Or you can leave us a voicemail on our website so you can get that voicemail crown, theroutinepodcast.com.
You can get the voicemail crown, and more importantly, you can beat Erky. Because if not, Erky is going to leave us another voicemail to talk about UCLA. And Erky, keep it up. Love your voicemail. To leave us a voicemail, go to theroutinepodcast.com. At the top of the page, you'll see Be a Part of the Conversation. Click that. Scroll down to the bottom of the page. You'll see a microphone. Click the microphone and leave us your voicemail.
Yes. And what's actually funny about the whole Erky voicemail situation is that we actually got a tweet from @Gymtertainment. And she said, Erky, your voicemails on the Routine Podcast are the best. Never will be sick of hearing about UCLA. Go Bruins.
I love it. I'm still waiting for the Oklahoma voicemail.
I know. We did have some Oklahoma people say that they want to leave a voicemail, but they're scared. But don't be scared. We love voicemails.
What are they scared
I know
of?
people are like nervous of leaving the voicemail. But don't worry, like if you fumble your words, I'll edit it so that you sound amazing.
Well, or if you fumble your words, just say, don't leave that voicemail and leave us another one. Don't push send.
You can take as many tries as you want.
We'd love to hear from Erky, and we'd love to hear from other fans as well.
Yes. It's been another great episode, Mom. I'm going to steal your line. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.